Amid the silent chaos of a forgotten landfill, routine is interrupted by an unexpected figure lying among the debris. Nothing about the scene makes sense. Expensive clothes, shallow breathing, and a silence that hides a dangerous past. Over time, the stranger blends into daily life, but their presence stirs glances, suspicions, and buried secrets. When the truth begins to surface, it becomes clear they didn't end up there by accident. Someone wanted them out of the game. If this story interested you, subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Let's begin. Mornings on the outskirts of the West End of New York City's landfill always began with the same soundtrack. The rustling of garbage bags being rummaged through, the creaking of wheelbarrows pushed with effort, and the clinking of cans hitting one another inside plastic bags. It was in this dusty, vibrant setting that Olivia Helen, a 12-year-old girl, walked every day alongside her grandfather, known in the community simply as Old Man Joe. On her back, she carried a hand-stitched cloth sack, where she placed hard plastics, aluminum scraps, and what she called things that could still be worth something. This was routine. This was what she knew as survival. The bittersweet and strong smell of decomposition was, for Olivia, the perfume of her universe. She no longer smelled it, or rather it blended with the scent of earth dampened by a light drizzle and the faint aroma of filtered coffee she drank before leaving home. Old Man Joe, a man with weathered skin and calloused hands, was guided by experience. He knew where the chance of finding valuable material was greater, where the night collection trucks dumped the rich garbage from the city's affluent areas. They worked in a complicit silence, interrupted only by short instructions or a murmur about the weather. Olivia, with the agility of a small feline, dodged mountains of debris, her eyes trained to identify the glint of metal or the opaque tone of recyclable plastic. She was quick and above all patient. Old Man Joe used to say that patience was a scavenger's greatest treasure, because the trash always yielded its secrets to those who knew how to wait. On that particular morning, there was a strange tension in the air. The sky was divided between dark clouds and a lazy sun, a prelude to heavy rain that could ruin the day's work. The movement of scavengers was more intense, all trying to take advantage of the last hours of dry weather. Olivia moved a little away from Old Man Joe to check a pile that seemed untouched. It was then that she spotted a different figure among the piles of debris. Something about that silhouette sprawled over the remains caught her attention. It wasn't a large garbage bag, nor an old appliance. It looked human. She approached carefully, stepping between torn bags and furniture scraps. Olivia's heart beat a rapid rhythm of fear and curiosity. She had seen many strange things at the landfill: abandoned animals, mysterious objects, and even violent fights. But this was different. When she got closer, she realized it wasn't just a discarded object, but a man. He was lying on his side, almost buried by a thin layer of dust and small debris. His clothes were dirty and disheveled, but the fine fabric of his shirt and his strangely intact leather shoes did not match the surrounding scene. The contrast was stark. It was as if a mannequin from a luxury store had been dressed and unceremoniously thrown there. He was unconscious, pale, breathing shallowly, as if he had been snatched from another world and dropped there without warning. He did not have the careless appearance of those living on the street or the look of desperation of substance users. There was something about him that evoked order and wealth. Now brutally interrupted. Not knowing what to do, Olivia ran to Old Man Joe. The old scavenger was focused on crushing aluminum cans with the sole of his shoe, his face furrowed in effort. "Old Man Joe! Old Man Joe! There's a man over there, a young man. He's not breathing right." Olivia's voice was choked. Old Man Joe stopped what he was doing, wiped his hands on his worn pants, and followed his granddaughter. He had seen everything in his years at the landfill, and the first thing that came to mind was a grim thought: another problem. At first, he thought it was another drug addict or someone who had escaped from a clinic, as had happened before. Life there was hard and unforgiving, and the rule was, don't get involved. But as he approached, Old Man Joe hesitated. The man really didn't fit in. His paleness was that of someone in shock, not of chronic exhaustion. And then he noticed the detail: a wristwatch that continued to accurately mark the hours on the man's arm. It was an expensive watch, made of brushed metal, completely unharmed. This was not a homeless person. This was someone who had been abandoned there. perhaps robbed and left behind, or even more seriously, a victim of an accident. Doubt overcame him. Decency, a quality that the landfill could not bury, spoke louder. "Come on, Olivia. Let's get him out of here," Old Man Joe decided. Dragging the man was a difficult task. His body was heavy and inert. Olivia helped as much as she could, holding his feet while Old Man Joe pulled him by the shoulders. They managed to take him to a slightly cleaner area and, with the help of a neighbor who was passing by with a wheelbarrow, transported him to their home. Old Man Joe and Olivia's home was simple, an improvised structure made of wood, canvas, and what Old Man Joe proudly called dignity. There wasn't much. One room served as living room, bedroom, and kitchen. They laid him on a straw mat in the corner, the cleanest and coolest spot in the house. Still unconscious, the man was covered with an old sheet. "Keep an eye on him, my granddaughter. I'm going to the community clinic to see if Nurse Cindy can come take a look. We can't take him to the city. They'll want to know too much, and we have nothing to do with it." Old Man Joe left, leaving Olivia and the stranger in the muffled silence of the house. Olivia sat on the edge of the mat, watching him. Up close, he seemed even stranger. He had stubble, which seemed to have grown in the last few days, and his hair, though dirty, had a cut that suggested he had been recently groomed. The watch, still on his wrist, was a symbol of a world Olivia only saw from afar, through commercials on the neighbor's television. The community nurse, Nurse Cindy, a practical and kind-hearted woman, came to examine the man. She found that he was weak, dehydrated, but with no apparent serious injuries. "I think it's just the shock, Old Man Joe. He seems to be in a state of shock, temporary amnesia, perhaps. Give him coconut water and a thin broth. If he doesn't improve in 2 days, he needs to be taken to the hospital." The following days were of slow recovery. The stranger would open his eyes occasionally, blink, look around with an expression of total confusion, and fall back asleep. He didn't speak. Old Man Joe and Olivia fed and cleaned him carefully. When he finally managed to sit up, his gaze remained lost, with no clear memory of who he was or where he came from. However, there was something about him that resisted the dirt and chaos. He barely spoke, but thanked with simple gestures, a nod of the head, a weak smile, and showed a strange gentleness for someone in such a precarious situation. Olivia began to observe him with the attention of a scientist examining a rare sample. He seemed uncomfortable with the dirt, picking specks of dust from the mat with his fingertips and arranging the few objects around him with almost methodical precision. Once, Old Man Joe had brought home an old newspaper he used to line the floor, and Olivia saw him folding the newspaper with the same elegance one folds a starched shirt. Subtle details, but they painted a portrait of a previous life of extreme refinement. Olivia felt that these details were pieces of an invisible puzzle she was silently building. Who was that man? How did he end up there? The community, at first, viewed him with the usual suspicion reserved for outsiders. But the man's silence and meekness, combined with his total inability to adapt to the environment, made him harmless. Old Man Joe called him Mr., for lack of a name, and Mr. nodded in response. One late afternoon, while Old Man Joe was at the recycling center exchanging the day's materials for a few pennies, Olivia saw Mr.'s clothes hanging on the clothesline. The pants, washed and almost dry, still had the fine fabric and dark color of executive attire. Curiosity got the better of her. She went over and rummaged through the pockets. There was no money. In one of the pockets, however, she felt something hard. It was the lining that was torn. She stuck her finger in and pulled. It was a cracked plastic ID badge, the photo slightly faded of a smiling man. The image, despite the wear, was unmistakable. The smiling man was Mr. Below the photo, the name Edward Matthews. And above, the title Olivia didn't quite understand, but felt was important, Chief Executive Officer. Olivia didn't understand the weight of the title, but the word executive resonated in her mind. She put the badge at the bottom of her treasure box, along with pencil stubs, folded sheets with drawings, and a key whose origin she never discovered. The secret was now hers. She had his name, and the name was the key to everything. She couldn't tell Old Man Joe. The old man would probably hand him over to the authorities, and Olivia felt a strange bond of protection for Mr. Edward, little by little, began to participate in the household routine. He wasn't skilled at the heavy work of the landfill, but he found usefulness in other ways. He helped with small tasks, repaired broken objects that Old Man Joe brought home, and even assisted with the recycling cart. He was methodical. His strength seemed to have returned, and with it a need to be useful. The community viewed him with suspicion at first. A man too silent and elegant for that place. But time and actions speak louder than appearance. One day the alley's water pump stopped working. Edward, using only a few rusty tools and surprising logic, managed to fix it. Another time, he assembled a solid bench for the improvised bus stop at the entrance with discarded iron pieces. He gained the sympathy of some residents who, although still calling him the stranger, now did so with a smile. Still, he carried something restless in his eyes, a deep emptiness, as if he knew there was more than that silent, dirt-stained present. He tried to remember. He would lie on the mat and stare at the canvas ceiling, forcing his mind. Nothing, just a cold fog. While Edward Matthews's life was restarting at the landfill, in another part of the city, his daughter Bea Matthews's life was crumbling. Bea, a 4-year-old girl, woke up every night calling for her father. The family home, a cold and silent mansion in the Upper East Side neighborhood, was now a labyrinth of empty rooms and painful memories. Bea's mother had passed away a few years earlier, and Edward's sudden absence, having disappeared for almost a month without a trace, triggered something deeper in the child. She didn't cry hysterically, but lived in a state of contained sadness, as if she felt her father's heart still beating, somewhere, even outside the house. Bea was under the care of a nanny hired by the missing executive's company, a young woman named Julia. Julia was paid to maintain the girl's routine, but she couldn't fill the void. Bea drew frequently. They weren't typical children's drawings. She always drew the same thing, a blonde girl holding the hand of a man with stubble. Her father had a discreet beard, and the man in the drawing had a slightly thicker beard. One afternoon, the nanny was trying to convince Bea to eat. The girl was scribbling intensely. "Who is this girl, Bea?" Julia asked. Bea pointed the drawing at the nanny. "This is the landfill girl." Julia smiled without understanding. There was no blonde girl, no landfill in Bea's life. She thought it was just childish fantasy, Bea's way of dealing with the pain. But for Bea, the landfill girl was a recurring figure in her dreams. She was her father's guardian. In the community, Olivia, in possession of the badge and the secret name, began to see Edward with new eyes. He wasn't just Mr. He was a CEO, a man of power and money. This made his presence there even more enigmatic. She couldn't forget the image of him folding the newspaper with such reverence. One day, Edward was walking through the community, making a delivery of recyclables for Old Man Joe, when he passed a wall where children had painted drawings with donated paint. He stopped. His gaze locked on a simple drawing, a sunflower sketched in crooked lines and faded colors. His eyes fixed on that symbol, and a strange sensation, a painful tug of memory, invaded him. He didn't know why, but the sunflower seemed important. In his mind, disconnected flashes began to emerge. A brightly lit room, echoing voices, and the drawing of a sunflower on a paper napkin. Almost by reflex, he put his hand in his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper from a worn wallet that Old Man Joe had found in his clothes and kept. It was the same drawing. A sunflower, slightly more detailed, scribbled by a child. He had kept that piece of paper for years, from a moment of personal crisis long before his corporate ascent. He didn't remember the child. He didn't remember the crisis, but the symbol calmed him. The symbol connected him to something he had forgotten, his humanity. While these fragments disturbed him, he heard the shouts of a group of young people. One of them, Raymond, a clever boy who dreamed of being a videographer, had just posted a video he recorded in the community. Raymond filmed daily life for his amateur channel. That day he had filmed Edward. The video was short, with background music and an inspiring title, The Dignity of Work. In it, Edward appeared carrying debris with Old Man Joe, and in another scene, he smiled as he helped a woman renovate her fruit stand. The video quickly went viral on social media. The image of a distinguished-looking man, working humbly and smiling, was a powerful contrast. The video did not clearly show his face, but there was a gesture that stood out, the elegant way his hands folded a piece of tarpaulin for the fruit stand. At the mansion, Julia, the nanny, was scrolling through her newsfeed to distract herself while B drew. The video appeared on her screen. She watched, impressed by the community's story. B, who was nearby, heard Old Man Joe's voice in the narration. She got up and went to the nanny. Her eyes widened as she saw the man on the screen. She ran to the screen and pointed her finger, her voice choked and full of certainty. "It's my daddy." Julia froze. The man didn't look like the prim and proper Edward Matthews from the portraits, but the way he folded the tarpaulin, it was exactly Edward's methodical way of folding his clothes after showering. Frightened but feeling she needed to act, she sent the footage to the company's team, who were still trying to locate the missing CEO. The alert was immediate. The security team of Matthews Holding, led by an ambitious man named Victor, acted with discretion and speed. They feared that the video, if confirmed, could cause a scandal and harm the company's stock. Edward's disappearance had already cost millions. That same night, a team was discreetly sent to the community. The order was simple: confirm his identity and bring Edward back without a fuss. They believed it was a kidnapping, a ransom demand that never arrived, and the unexpected appearance of the CEO at the landfill was a risk. The next day, a man in a tie suit and leather shoes that looked out of place on the dirt ground appeared. He introduced himself as a representative of an NGO interested in social projects in the area. He spoke with some residents, handed out cards, and took photos of the surroundings, always with his discreet cell phone, focused on Old Man Joe and Edward. Olivia, with her keen street perception, noticed the outsider's presence. He didn't smell like an NGO. He smelled like power and urgency. She saw his gaze fixed on Old Man Joe and instinctively felt that something was about to change. Her secret was at risk. She returned home, rummaged through her treasure box, her heart racing, and pulled out the ID badge. The cracked plastic badge was the proof, the weapon, and the map. With it in her hands, she observed Edward, who was sitting on the doorstep, drawing with a piece of charcoal on old wood, a form of meditation he had discovered. The strokes were soft, yet firm, and soon formed the face of a smiling girl. Olivia approached and her heart skipped a beat. She recognized herself in the drawing. It was her, the 12-year-old girl from the landfill, drawn with the precision of an artist. Seeing him sign the work in the lower corner, the elegant and familiar handwriting appearing on the wood, the last fragment of the full name emerged at the tip of the charcoal: Edward Matthews. The silence between them became dense, charged with an unspoken truth. He still didn't fully know who he was, but his hand remembered. His art remembered. His daughter remembered. Edward felt the girl's presence beside him. His eyes met hers. He noticed the ID badge in Olivia's hand. The lost look he had carried for weeks was replaced by a spark of recognition, of terror, and of a painful lucidity. The moment of revelation was about to explode. Olivia, instead of asking, did what the community's kindness had taught her. The man she knew needed refuge, not an interrogation. "Mr. Matthews," she said, using the name for the first time, her voice soft but firm. "Don't you want to eat at our place? Old Man Joe is going to make some broth." That simple gesture, a child saying, "Don't you want to eat at our place?" would be the key to a reunion much greater than anyone could predict. He looked at the ID badge, at the girl, and at the drawing. He felt the weight of two worlds: the world of his past, of chief executive officer, and the world of his present, of a builder of benches with scrap metal. The first chapter of his new life was ending, and the second was announcing itself like a storm. He nodded slowly. The truth about his disappearance and the threat of Victor, the ambitious executive, were approaching the landfill. Edward was back in the game without knowing the rules. His redemption would begin soon, but the cost would be high, and Olivia and Old Man Joe, the improbable angels of his salvation, would be dragged into the eye of the hurricane of his life of luxury and power. He took a deep breath, trying to assimilate the full name he had just signed, the name that connected him to a destiny he had forgotten. Olivia's simple offer, "Don't you want to eat at our place?" "Old Man Joe is going to make some broth," sounded to Edward Matthews like a distant bell, an invitation to humanity he could barely recognize. The ID badge in the girl's hand, the image of that smiling, suited man, was the ghost of his former life. Olivia, with the sweetness and firmness of someone who grew up seeing the world in black and white, gave him time to absorb the shock. She knew that the truth didn't need to be shouted, just accepted. The silence in the wooden and canvas house that night was the sound of two worlds colliding. Old Man Joe, suspicious, looked from Edward to Olivia. The girl had told him about the cracked plastic badge and about the signature Mr. had made on the board. Old Man Joe, though simple, was clever. "Chief Executive Officer," he repeated, frowning. "That's big shot people, Olivia. People who live in another world. And we shouldn't get involved with big shot people." Edward, who had accepted the invitation and was sitting on the mat with the plate of thin broth in his hands, couldn't speak. The words seemed stuck in his throat, the puzzle piece, slipping and returning to the beginning. He was there, the president of one of the largest holdings in the Northeast, dressed in rags, being fed by a child and an old scavenger, and he couldn't remember how he had gotten into that situation. The amnesia was a thick curtain, and the badge was the tear that allowed him to see the light. I am Edward Matthews," he managed to murmur, his voice hoarse, almost a whisper. "We know, mister." "But that doesn't change who you are here," Olivia said, pointing to the drawing board where his smiling face was etched. "Here, you're the one who fixed the water pump and made the bus bench." The simplicity of that statement was a blow to Edward's chest. The identity that had been stolen from him by amnesia was being rewritten by the community with acts of kindness. At the landfill, he wasn't the CEO but the helpful man. Old Man Joe, more pragmatic, observed the tension. "Those people in suits, Olivia, the one from the NGO, they didn't come here out of charity. They came to find a CEO, and when they find him, our lives will change. Not for the better." The old man's fear was palpable. Discretion was their only currency of safety. Edward didn't need to remember to understand the threat. That suited man, the subtle air of power that lingered, indicated that his disappearance was a matter of high importance and probably high risks. The absence of a ransom demand and the abandonment at the landfill suggested a settling of scores, not a kidnapping. He had been discarded, and whoever had done it didn't want him found alive. "I can't let them risk themselves for me," Edward said, getting up with difficulty. His body, though recovered, still bore the mark of abandonment. "You're not going anywhere, not now," Old Man Joe intervened firmly. "They're watching. If you leave here, it'll be like giving away our location. You stay. We'll think." As the night progressed, Edward and Olivia created a silent plan. Olivia knew they needed more information. Old Man Joe had taught her that every piece of trash has a story, and Edward's story was somewhere, buried in the city. The suited man from the NGO was Victor Braga, the vice president of Matthews Holding, and the silent architect of the chaos. Victor was ambitious, methodical, and saw Edward's disappearance as the opportunity of a lifetime. He had not orchestrated the assault that led Edward to the landfill, but upon learning of the CEO's absence, he acted quickly to consolidate his power, manipulating the board and, most crucially, controlling the search. His team's discretion was to ensure Edward wasn't found by third parties before he could control the narrative. "He can't return to the board," Victor repeated to his private security guard, Roger, a large and silent man, as they observed aerial photos of the community. "If the video spreads further, if the press finds out the CEO was found in the landfill, the company collapses. But if he is found, disoriented with no memory and brought back by me, I'm the hero and he's the sick one, and the control is mine." Victor knew Edward had a secret file, an insurance policy against him and other corrupt executives in the company, stored somewhere. Edward's amnesia was Victor's chance to find and destroy that file before the CEO recovered his memory. At the mansion, little B continued to draw, now with a new conviction. The video of Daddy at the landfill was proof. Julia, the nanny, was in a panic. She couldn't risk B's safety, but she also didn't trust Victor, who had taken suffocating control over the girl's and the house's life. Julia, secretly, began to investigate. She knew B loved sunflowers. She remembered Edward giving B a small sunflower drawn on a napkin, saying it was the symbol of her strength. This small memory was Julia's connection. She linked B's drawing, the drawing on the landfill wall, and Edward's obsession with the symbol. The next morning, Olivia, pretending to leave for work, observed Victor and Roger. She noticed they communicated via radio and focused on monitoring Old Man Joe's house. Olivia needed an alibi, a reason to get away from the house. She went to Raymond, the young videographer, Raymond, that video of Mr. It's famous, isn't it? I'm blowing up, Olivia. Almost 10,000 views. People love stories of overcoming. Raymond was euphoric. Then you have to record another one. We need more stories of overcoming. But you need to help me. We're going to film the back alley today. I'll help you carry the equipment. Olivia created the perfect distraction. While Raymond filmed and the community posed for the camera, drawing Victor and Roger's attention, Olivia crept through the bushes, following the trail of the suited outsider to the community entrance. She knew Victor was staying in a luxury hotel near the upscale area. Using Edward's ID badge as a silent passport, she managed to reach the city center. She had one goal: to find out who Edward Matthews, the executive, was and what led him to be discarded. Olivia found an internet cafe and typed the name on the badge, Edward Matthews, Chief Executive Officer. The news was overwhelming. Billionaire CEO missing. Crisis at Matthews Holding. The photos showed Edward at gala dinners with a forced smile, alongside Victor, the current savior of the company. She discovered the existence of Bea, the blonde girl, Edward's only daughter, who had lost her mother a few years earlier. And she discovered the company's story. Edward had taken over after a great family tragedy, and there were rumors that he was about to expose a fund embezzlement scheme led by an internal group, which explained his sudden disappearance. Olivia felt a shiver. Edward was not just a victim. He was a fallen hero, and she and Old Man Joe had become unwitting guardians of a dangerous corporate secret. Returning to the community, Olivia shared what she discovered with Old Man Joe. He's not just a lost man, Old Man Joe. He was going to expose very powerful people who don't want him to remember anything. The responsibility was enormous. Old Man Joe, looking at Edward, who was repairing the wheelbarrow with almost Zen concentration, made a decision. We're going to protect him. We don't get involved in crime, but we protect those who need it. And he's a good man deep down. Edward, who had overheard the conversation, approached. What was I going to report? What did I do? You were about to be brave, mister. And courage cost you dearly, Olivia said, handing him a copy of the news she had printed. As he read the details, a new flash hit Edward. The office, the heated argument with Victor about fund embezzlement, and the feeling that he had recorded everything. The file? I have a file. It's somewhere safe. It's proof of everything. He touched his temple, trying to pierce the fog of amnesia. Urgency set in. Victor knew Edward was alive, and with each passing day, Edward's chance of recovering his memory and the file increased. The next day, Victor, impatient with the inefficiency of his discreet methods, decided to take a risk. He put on casual clothes, grabbed a bag of donations, and went personally to the landfill. He introduced himself as a social worker from Matthews Holding, offering help and directly asking about the man from the video. Old Man Joe and Olivia were prepared. He left. Old Man Joe lied convincingly. He got better and moved on. He was a wanderer, mister. He had no fixed place. Victor, however, was a predator. He noticed a new piece of wood on the house's fence, where Edward had nailed a board to reinforce it. The nail was driven with a precision that didn't match Old Man Joe's careless work. Furthermore, Victor smelled the faint scent of a branded soap, which he recognized from his own home, lingering on the canvas. Old Man Joe and Olivia were lying. I see. That's a shame. Mr. Edward Matthews, our CEO, has gone missing, and any lead is valuable. If he comes back or if you remember anything, please contact me, Victor said, handing a thick envelope to Old Man Joe. Old Man Joe took the money and watched him leave. People who give money without asking don't want to help. They want to buy silence. That night, the community was abuzz. Raymond posted the video of the fake NGO visiting the landfill. The contrast between the rich man and the community aroused the curiosity of the local press. Victor had exposed himself. Edward, now more alert, knew there was no more time. He needed to leave. He remembered the crisis with Victor and taking a train to try to escape and think before being caught and thrown into the landfill. The last place he was fully conscious was his company office. The clue was there. I have to go to the office, Edward told Olivia. There's a clue there, a safe. I don't know. But the key to remembering is there. And how will you get in there? The CEO is missing. If you show up, Victor will arrest you or worse. Olivia's concern was real. Edward picked up the cracked ID badge. "I am the CEO, Olivia, and my face is still in my memory." Edward's idea was to infiltrate. He would use his methodical skills and his disheveled appearance as a disguise. He wouldn't be the CEO but an intruder. Olivia had a plan. She would use Raymond and the press's curiosity to their advantage. Raymond is doing well. Let's use that. Let's create an event in the community, a party. While everyone is looking here, you disappear. And I'll go with you. No, Olivia. It's too dangerous. I know you, Mr. Matthews. You don't remember who you are, but I do. You are the CEO who fell and who will now rise. I am the only one who knows about the badge and the file. You need me. The determination in Olivia's eyes was the same that made her find things that could still be worth something. Old Man Joe, though reluctant, agreed. Go, both of you. But come back. And bring that file so we can get rid of these vultures. The night of the plan arrived. Raymond had managed to attract a local TV crew with the promise of an exclusive report on solidarity at the landfill. The community was lit by improvised lamps, and all attention was on the cameras. Victor and Roger were nearby, watching from a distance, frustrated by the loss of control of the situation. Edward, dressed in borrowed clothes and his hair cut by Olivia with gardening shears, looked like just another resident. He carried the ID badge in his pocket, a reminder of his mission. Olivia guided him through the dark alleys, using her street smarts. The moment the reporter was interviewing Old Man Joe, Olivia and Edward escaped. Their destination, the financial center of New York City, the headquarters of Matthews Holding. The journey was long and silent. On the crowded bus, Edward observed the city lights, each tall building a hammer against the wall of his memory. The contrast between the landfill and luxury was brutal. Olivia, seeing Edward's discomfort, held his hand. The gesture brought Edward a painful flash of memory. A small child's hand, Bee's, holding his. He felt the weight of fatherhood and loss. Upon arriving at the Matthews Holding building, the grandeur of the place almost crushed them. Edward now was just a vagrant with a street girl by his side. Olivia smiled at her plan. "We're going in." "You're not the CEO. You're the construction janitor who came to fix the wiring, and I'm your helper." Olivia's confidence was Edward's strength. They sneaked through the service entrance. Edward, with his methodical way, managed to improvise a tool to open a side door. Inside the glass and steel tower, the silence was oppressive. The luxury was cold and lifeless. Edward was in his domain, but he felt like a stranger. He remembered the security room, the access codes. He moved forward, guided by surprising muscle memory, while Olivia monitored the hallway, attentive to every sound. They reached the executive office, a room on the top floor, with a breathtaking view of the city, Edward's office. Victor had taken possession of it. However, the office had a blind spot, a place Victor didn't know about. A shelf of old books. Edward, guided by faint memory, pressed a specific book. The bookcase slid, revealing an old safe, the code. He forced his memory. Names, dates, nothing. Olivia, observing the objects on Victor's desk, noticed a small photo frame. A photo of Victor smiling alongside Bee, Edward's daughter. Victor was manipulating the girl, presenting himself as an uncle, a hero. "Mr. Matthews, you don't remember safe codes. But you remember your daughter. What does she mean to you?" Olivia's question was the key. Bee, sunflower, strength, his daughter's birth date. Edward began to dial the numbers, his hands trembling. The numbers were Bee's. The safe opened with a click. Inside there was no gold, no stacks of money. Just a USB drive and a letter. The USB drive was the file, the proof against Victor and the corrupt individuals. The letter was from his late wife, written shortly before her passing, a reminder that true wealth was in family. The moment Edward took the USB drive, the silent alarm went off. Victor had installed a discreet sensor in the safe. The hallway lights came on. Roger, the security guard, and Victor were at the door. "Well, the undead CEO," Victor sneered with a cruel smile. "Did you think you could come back from the landfill and reclaim your throne, Edward? You're a fool. And now you're going to have a permanent disappearance." Edward stood up, Olivia by his side, the girl's hand gripping the USB drive tightly. He had recovered the evidence, but he was cornered. The amnesia might have gone, but the danger had returned with full force. The stage was set for the climax in the next chapter, where Edward's truth and Olivia's courage would be tested to the limit, and little B, involuntarily, would become the key piece to his salvation. The air in the executive office of Matthews Holding turned icy, charged with Victor Braga's hostility and Edward Matthews's silent determination. The CEO, who a month earlier had been discarded like trash, was back on his throne, but it was a throne surrounded by danger. Beside him, Olivia, the landfill girl, held the USB drive like a talisman, her courage contrasting with the oppressive luxury of the environment. Well, the undead CEO, Victor sneered with a cruel smile that didn't reach his eyes. He gestured to Roger, his private security guard, who blocked the door. Did you think you could come back from the landfill and reclaim your throne, Edward? You're a fool. And now you're going to have a permanent disappearance. An unfortunate accident, perhaps. Edward felt the adrenaline clear the last remnants of his amnesia. He remembered Victor, the embezzlements, the fight. His memory was back, but the threat was imminent. He slightly moved his body in front of Olivia. The game is over, Victor, Edward said, his voice gaining the firmness of a CEO, but with the roughness of someone who had slept on the ground. I have the proof. And if you try anything, the USB drive will end up in the hands of the press. The truth about your embezzlement schemes and the company's downfall will explode. Victor chuckled, a dry, calculating sound. Do you think I'm stupid, Edward? Do you think you're the only one who thinks about the press? You're alone, a man with amnesia, who was found in the gutter. If you fall from this window now, the USB drive will be found, and I'll say it's your desperate attempt to destabilize the company for having lost your mind. I'm the savior, remember? Roger began to advance slowly. Edward knew he couldn't fight the security guard, who was twice his size. He needed a distraction, a quick plan. He looked at Olivia, and the girl understood. Olivia, with the agility of someone who dodges debris, quickly moved forward and threw a metallic object which she had picked up from a side table against the large glass panel overlooking the city. The sound of metal hitting the tempered glass was sharp, but the glass didn't break. It was enough. Alarm! Edward shouted, seizing the moment of surprise. Fire! The building is evacuating! Victor was startled for a second, looking at the control panel that should have been in Roger's hands. In that instant, Edward moved to the table and grabbed a heavy paperweight. He threw it at Roger's face, who staggered. Run, Olivia! The service elevator! Wait for me on the street! Olivia didn't hesitate. She ran down the corridor, clutching the USB drive. Victor tried to reach her, but Edward grabbed him by the collar, throwing him against the wall. Your vanity has always been your weakness, Victor. The company was your toy. My daughter, no. As he struggled with Victor, Edward felt the weight of violence for the first time in a long time. It was a fight for his life, for his name, and above all, for the safety of B and his guardians at the landfill. Victor managed to break free, rage disfiguring his face. He picked up the phone from his desk and yelled at Roger. Lock down the building. No one in, no one out. Get the girl. Olivia ran through the corridors. The silence of the office had been replaced by the sound of her own feet hitting the marble. She reached the service elevator, but Roger was fast. He caught her before the doors closed. Roger grabbed Olivia's arm with brutal force. Give me that brat! You don't know what you're getting yourself into. Olivia, feeling the pain, screamed. She remembered Old Man Joe teaching her to defend herself from animals at the landfill. She used her body weight to kick Roger's knee. The giant let out a grunt of pain and released her. Olivia pressed the elevator button, and this time the doors closed in front of her. In the office, Edward was cornered. Victor had armed himself with a metal letter opener. You're trapped here, Edward. No one will find you. And tomorrow I'll be the effective CEO, and you'll be a footnote in the news. Edward looked at the city view. The only way out was the one Olivia had attempted, the glass. He grabbed a chair and hurled it against the panel. The tempered glass cracked but didn't break. He tried again and again, with the fury of someone who had lost a month of his life. Finally, on the fifth blow, the glass shattered with a tremendous crash. The cold night wind rushed into the room. Edward, taking advantage of Victor's distraction, jumped through the opening and clung to the railing of the cleaning balcony on the floor below, sliding dangerously. He climbed with the strength of desperation, the image of B and Olivia in his mind. Victor, furious, looked down and screamed. Meanwhile, Olivia managed to descend in the elevator. She ran out into the street, but Roger had alerted the gate guards. They were looking for her. Olivia hid in a dark alley, the USB drive clutched in her sweaty hand. She looked up at the sky and saw the highest point of the Matthews Holding building, where the emergency light flashed. Mr. Matthews was up there. Olivia, remembering the news she had read, had an insight. There was one person in the city who loved Edward and was desperately looking for him, and that person was his daughter. She needed to go to B. The child was the only one who couldn't be bought by Victor. She took a taxi using the money old man Joe had given her for emergencies. To the Upper East Side, please. As fast as you can. Matthews Mansion. At the mansion, B was restless. Julia, the nanny, had seen the local news about the commotion at the company headquarters. Something about an alarm and an unwanted presence. She called Victor, but he didn't answer. She knew something was wrong and that B's safety was at risk. When Olivia arrived at the mansion gate, Julia was tense. Olivia had to introduce herself as a friend of the man from the landfill. She showed Edward's ID badge. I'm Olivia. I helped him. Your dad is in danger. I have the evidence. Julia, seeing the truth in Olivia's desperate eyes, opened the gate. Inside the house, B was sitting, drawing sunflowers on a sheet of paper. Upon seeing Olivia, B jumped. She recognized the girl from her drawing. You're the landfill girl. You're with my dad. B ran and hugged Olivia. Your dad sent me here, B. He's coming, but we need to hide. Olivia handed the USB drive to Julia. Keep this safe. It's the key to the truth. Victor can't get it. Julia, now an accomplice, hid the USB drive in an unlikely place, behind the television screen in the living room. In the Matthews Holding building, Edward had managed to descend to an intermediate floor, where he accessed a fire escape. He was breathless but free from Victor's grip. He called Old Man Joe, who was watching everything on TV, where images of the broken glass in the executive tower were the highlight. Old Man Joe, I'm on the run. Victor is after me. I took Olivia to B's house. Stay together. I'm going to the hideout. We'll meet you there. Keep Olivia and B safe. I'll find a way to switch on the pump. Old Man Joe understood the coded language. Switch on the pump meant to release the file. Edward took a taxi and went to the only place Victor would never think to look for him. The hideout wasn't a bunker or a beach house. It was an old charity hospice that the Matthews family managed, outside the city, where Edward spent hours away from the corporate noise. Meanwhile, Victor and Roger, seeing that Edward had fled, focused all their attention on his daughter. They knew that if Edward loved anything, it was B. The girl would be the bait. Victor arrived at the mansion, and the scene he found was his worst nightmare. Olivia, the landfill girl, and Julia, the nanny, talking tensely. He realized that an alliance had formed. Julia, where is your father, B? What is this girl doing here? Victor feigned concern. B, sensing the malice in Victor's voice, ran behind Olivia. You're mean. You hurt my dad. I don't know anything, Dr. Victor, Julia lied with a trembling voice. The girl got lost and came asking for help. Victor knew it was too late for the disguise. He pushed Julia, and Roger searched the house. They didn't find the USB drive. Victor looked at B and had the cruelest idea, the sunflower. He saw the sunflower drawings and remembered the story that Edward had had a personal crisis years ago, and a child had comforted him with a sunflower drawing. Victor realized that the sunflower was the key to Edward's memory and emotion, and the file could only be released with B's emotional code. Julia, you and this trash picker will accompany me, Victor said, grabbing B by the arm, or your father will never see his daughter again. The blackmail was the twist Edward hadn't foreseen. The tension increased. Olivia and Julia, to protect B, agreed to go with Victor. Roger took them to a remote location, a country house Victor used for his shady business meetings. While they were being taken, Olivia had a moment alone with Julia. You need to call Old Man Joe. I memorized the number. Tell him that the sunflower is in danger and the sun has hidden. Julia managed discreetly to send the message to Old Man Joe, who was in the community watching the news. The news was terrible. B. Matthews was missing, and Matthews Holding was offering a high reward. Old Man Joe understood. The sunflower was B, the sun was Edward. The girl was in Victor's hands. Old Man Joe grabbed the keys to his old pickup truck and headed for the hideout. He had to warn Edward. At the charity hospice, Edward was hidden, his memory returning in waves, each flash of B hitting him harder. Old Man Joe arrived and the news shook him. B is with Victor. Olivia and the nanny are with her. Olivia's message was, "The sunflower is in danger and the sun has hidden." The phrase hit Edward like lightning. The sunflower was the symbol of his redemption, of his humanity. And now Victor was using his daughter to find him. Edward picked up his cell phone. He needed to release the file, but he knew that if he did, he would put B's life in immediate danger. He called Victor's corporate number. "Victor, release my daughter, and Olivia and the nanny. You want me." "I surrender," Victor chuckled. "Edward, you're very predictable. And the proof? Where's the USB drive?" "The USB drive is in a safe place. If you don't free the three of them, I'll release it in 24 hours. You have my word." Victor was at a crossroads. He needed the USB drive, but he needed Edward to ensure secrecy. 3 hours. The old document building in the Docklands. Come alone. If you don't show up or if the police find out, I swear Olivia and B will have an accident. The threat was real. Edward had a dilemma. Release the file and save the company from Victor, but risk his daughter's life or surrender to save B and lose the chance for justice. Old Man Joe, hearing the conversation, intervened. "You're not going alone. You're the CEO, but now you're a father. And I'm Old Man Joe, and nobody messes with our family." The climax had arrived. Edward's corporate life had merged with the simple life of the community. Edward's redemption would not be solitary. It would be a battle of classes, where the dignity of the landfill would face the coldness of power. Edward took out his old wallet, pulled out the sunflower drawing, and put it in his pocket. He needed more than courage. He needed faith, the faith the landfill girl had given him back. The docklands of New York City, with its empty warehouses and the salty breeze of dawn, was the perfect stage for the showdown. The old Matthews Holding Document Building, an abandoned mansion, was a specter of the city's corporate history, a place where secrets were buried. Edward Matthews was there, driven not by the title of CEO but by the primal instinct of a father. Victor's threat was clear. The rescue of his daughter B and his unexpected guardian Olivia depended on his surrender. 3 hours, Victor. I'm here. Release the three of them. Edward's voice echoed in the dusty hall, charged with an authority that amnesia couldn't steal. He was alone, dressed in the simple clothes of his humble present, but with the firm posture of his powerful past. The answer came from Victor, who was hidden in the shadows with B, Olivia, and Julia tied and gagged in a corner. "You have something I want, Edward, and I have something you want. Give me the USB drive and I'll release them." "I don't have it," Edward said, remaining calm. "The file is secure, and it will be automatically released if I don't call a contact every hour." "You won't get it. What you want is control of the company, Victor, and that I can give you. My immediate resignation in exchange for their safety. It's your only path to the CEO position without a scandal." Victor was irritated. He had underestimated how much life at the landfill had transformed Edward. The corporate CEO would be negotiable. The father not. Victor emerged from the shadows. He held B, the girl crying silently, her face pale. Beside her, Olivia stared at him with a courage that would make any executive envious. "Old Man Joe warned me you wouldn't come alone." Victor noticed Edward's gaze at a strategic point. "Your old friend from the landfill." "How pathetic. You've lost everything, Edward. You lost your memory, you lost your dignity, and now you're going to give me your company. And if that USB drive is released, I'll deny it. I'll say you're crazy and fabricated evidence against me." Victor's strength lay in lies and his position of power. But Edward had a card up his sleeve, one Victor couldn't foresee, the solidarity of the community and the love of his daughter. "The file isn't with Old Man Joe, Victor. And if it's released, you won't have time to defend yourself. You're a thief and a scoundrel," Edward said. Behind the pile of documents, Old Man Joe emerged from the shadows. He wasn't armed, but he carried an object that made Victor hesitate, a video camera. "Raymond is on the ship's mast, mister, and he's recording everything. You and your confession." Raymond, the young videographer from the community, had followed Old Man Joe and was recording the confrontation from a high, discreet vantage point. The recording was the bomb Edward didn't need to release on the USB drive. It was living proof of Victor's blackmail. Victor became furious. He released B and lunged at Old Man Joe. Edward acted immediately, throwing himself at Victor, taking advantage of the distraction. The fight was quick and violent, a mix of fury and desperation. Edward, though not a fighter, was fighting for something real, something Victor in his coldness would never understand, the purity of the life he had found at the landfill. As the two rolled on the dusty floor, Olivia, whose hands were tied with a thin rope, used the skills she learned at the landfill. She used a piece of glass to cut Julia's bonds. Julia, seeing Bea run, hugged her. Olivia then ran to the fight and, with the intelligence that distinguished her, grabbed a heavy pipe wrench that Old Man Joe had left and used it to hit Victor's hand, making him drop a weapon he had drawn. The blow was not intended to seriously injure, but to disarm. The impact of the metal against the concrete was loud. Olivia's unexpected arrival with the pipe wrench unbalanced Victor, who let out a cry of pain. At that moment, police sirens, triggered by Olivia's anonymous tip to the internet cafe before going to the mansion, began to sound. Victor, defeated and desperate, tried to flee, but was intercepted by Roger, the security guard, who, seeing the police and Victor's desperation, realized the game was over for his boss. He, in a last act of self-preservation, restrained him. Edward ran to Bea, who hugged him with all her might. "Daddy, you're back! I knew the landfill girl would help you." The reunion was an emotional peak. Edward hugged Bea, Olivia, and Old Man Joe, the unlikely family united amidst the chaos. With Victor's arrest and Roger's confession, who collaborated to mitigate his sentence, the truth came to light. The USB drive Julia had hidden, containing irrefutable evidence of fund embezzlement and manipulation, was handed over to the authorities. Raymond's video, capturing Victor's blackmail, became the definitive proof, going viral on social media and exposing the corruption at the top of Matthews Holding. Edward Matthews was no longer just the CEO. He was the victim, the hero, and, most importantly, the man who had found redemption in humility. The press sought him out. He didn't give interviews in the luxurious office, but rather in Old Man Joe's simple house, at the landfill. He spoke about the importance of community, about the dignity of work, and about how amnesia had given him the chance to reconnect with his values. "I was a rich man, but empty. Olivia and Old Man Joe taught me the true value of things that could still be worth something," he said, looking at Olivia with gratitude. Edward did not return to being the cold and distant executive. He resigned from the position of Chief Executive Officer to assume the presidency of the Administrative Board, focusing on philanthropy and transparency. He appointed a new, clean and ethical CEO and used his influence and resources to launch the Sunflower Project, a social program to urbanize and structure the landfill community, starting with the construction of an art school and a cooperative recycling center. Naming Old Man Joe as the supervisor, Olivia, the girl who kept the badge and the secret, received a full scholarship, and Edward's promise that she and Old Man Joe would have a decent house in the new community, but she refused the immediate move. "My life is here, Mr. Matthews, but I accept the scholarship." And Old Man Joe is happiest where he is most useful. The relationship between Bea and Olivia flourished. Bea, seeing Olivia through her child's eyes, began to draw the two girls together, now in the same world. Olivia was the older sister she never had, and Edward, a more present and human father. The reunion was not just of a father and his daughter, but of a man with his own soul. He no longer needed the position to feel complete. He needed the smell of the earth and the simple wisdom of the landfill which had saved him. He had learned that family ties were stronger than any holding. In the end, Edward, Old Man Joe, and Olivia stood in front of the wooden and canvas house, watching the first machines arrive to start the Sunflower Project. The clinking of cans was still the soundtrack, but now it was a sound of hope, not despair. Olivia smiled, hugging Old Man Joe. The CEO had been saved by the landfill girl, and in the process, had saved the entire community. And so, dear listeners, ends the story of Edward Matthews and the unwavering courage of Olivia Helen, a story where trash revealed more dignity than luxury, and a cracked plastic ID badge became the map to redemption. If you were moved by Edward and Bea's reunion, if you thrilled at Olivia and Old Man Joe's courage, and if you believe that every life in any scenario has value and can reinvent itself, then this is your channel. Don't miss the chance to be part of our community. Subscribe now so you don't miss our next stories of overcoming and real-life twists. Leave your like and comment below what was the most emotional moment for you. The scare at the landfill, the escape from Matthew's holding, or Bee's hug at the end. Your interaction is our fuel. We have a special playlist of stories with the same dramatic intensity and captivating twists. Click on the playlist here next to this video and continue the emotional journey with us. We look forward to your comment.